All right, well, good morning, everybody. As you can see, it is the end of the week here at SIFML, and we are really excited to get to talk to you about grants. So I'm Sarah Lambert. I'm the Vice President of Programs here at the Foundation. So I oversee all of our grant making processes and procedures and our community partnerships, strategic investment things. Basically, other duties as assigned is primarily my job. So really appreciate having the opportunity to talk through all of our grants with you. Hearing directly from grant seekers like you is the most important way for us to improve every element of what we do for everybody involved. So let me all right, so we are on Zoom today. So we would like just ask everybody stay on mute while you can, just to keep from having any sound issues. But don't hesitate to wave using those wave reactions to ask a question between presenters. And you can always ask questions in the chat box as well. The staff will be keeping an eye on that and helping you as we can. So, but the whole point is to keep this pretty chill. So don't hesitate to ask any question you might have. All right, so quickly going through our agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about some updates to the process this year, as well as highlight some of our past grant making. Then James will talk about our grant making philosophies, our focus areas, and the overall community grant structure. Then Lisa will do a technical walkthrough of the application in the portal. Jen will talk about some other opportunities coming up, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end as well. And then feel free to hop off mute for that portion of the meeting. So, alrighty. So before we get started, I do want to make sure to recognize all the donors who've made the Community Grants Program possible over all the years. By bringing together the generosity of these donors, we've been able to provide bigger and more impactful support to grantees than any single individual could do alone. I think there's a lot of power in the Community Foundation and in that ability to bring people together for the good of all. Right. So most of you are familiar with this chart. It shows the awards made in the last grant cycle by committee to give you context about what a reasonable grant request might be. We don't have a minimum or maximum request amount because we don't want to prevent you from asking for what you need and taking big swings. If you have a program that will cost $200,000 a year, but is absolutely the best solution to the worst problem, ask for it. But know that the higher the cost, the higher the scrutiny. And we want to ensure that everyone has the information they need to make the best decision for themselves. Our average grant size has really held steady around $20,000 for the last decade or so for reference. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so now forget everything on that chart because those numbers reflect grant making under our Education Works 10-year giving strategy, which sunsets this year. Launched by the Board of Trustees in 2015, the goal of Education Works was to support a regional education system that continually develops healthy and productive citizens. That work happens at all levels, from ensuring that our youngest friends have the resources they need to start school, all the way to supporting post-secondary attainment for high school graduates. In the past 10 years, CFNIL has made 222 grants, totaling $6,503,414.78 to 73 local organizations through Education Works. So here you can see the breakdown of how that money was spent and the organizations who benefited. So unsurprisingly, the organization that received the most funding through Education Works is Rock Valley College, and that's primarily due to the Linking Talent with Opportunity initiative. All right. So LTO was the largest competitive grant we have ever made, $675,000 over 3 years. The grant gave RVC, in conjunction with RPS 205, the Belvedere and Freeport School Districts, and Highland Community College, the runway to build a pathway system that allows high school students to earn stackable credentials and industry certifications while still in high school. They were aided by NIU's Education System Center, who were also funded by a multi-year Education Works grant. If you want to hop to the next slide. So Ed Systems provided backbone support to the coalition and helps navigate the state legislation around earning college credits in a high school setting. So they were instrumental in developing the Post-Secondary and Workforce Readiness Act, or the POWER Act, which, among other things, guarantees enrollment at Illinois community colleges for students who complete high school courses that are designed to improve college readiness. It became achingly clear through this work that having to pass a prerequisite math or English course, which isn't eligible for financial aid after graduation, but before enrolling in community college, is a huge stumbling block that led to many high school graduates quitting before they even got started. So now they can take a qualified transitional course while in high school for free, pass it, and know that they can start their college journey immediately. And they could be ahead of the game thanks to those stackable credentials they already earned. So CFNIL invested in Education Works initiatives outside of competitive grant making as well. We challenged RBC, Rockford University, and Highland to fundraise for permanent scholarship endowments to support local students attending local schools. CFNIL matched the $3.5 million the institutions collectively raised dollar for dollar, and creating endowments worth $7 million in total. The scholarship dollars are distributed directly to the institutions each year, and they use them to build better financial aid packages for students from Northern Illinois. It may not be a high profile program, but it's an effective one that directly impacts hundreds of students and will reduce the student debt load of our community for years to come. It strengthens local education partners and grows the talent of the region's workforce. Since 2016, those endowments have distributed $2,033,814.80 directly to those schools, and the endowments are now valued at $8,578,388.14. So that, as we nerds at CIFNL like to say, is the power of endowment. So this is all possible thanks to the generosity of Dr. Lewis and Violet Rubin. They left their estate valued at $24 million to CFNIL after Violet passed away in 2012. It was and still is the largest gift CFNIL has ever received and effectively doubled our competitive grant-making budget. The Rubins valued education, medical research, and medical education. With the aid of consultants who conducted a survey of the community's needs, our Board of Trustees determined that our community cared about and was ready for significant investment in education, and especially education for careers. By narrowing our focus in a direction that reflects both the values of our community and those of the Rubins, we felt we could amplify our impact. So Education Works was born. The Rubins gave us a chance to innovate and be responsive to the community's needs in a new way, and we were able to do it without diverting a penny from the rest of our programs. So 10 years later, it's time for CFNIL to innovate and respond to the community's needs in a new way again. The world looks very different than it did in 2015, and the needs in Northern Illinois have changed too. The environment you all are working in is as challenging and unpredictable as it's ever been. We know that we can't fill the financial gaps you're experiencing. Draining our entire endowment wouldn't do it. So the question we're asking ourselves is, what else? Outside of money, what can we do to make your jobs better? We don't want to make assumptions about what the needs of you and your stakeholders are, so we're in the process of gathering data. It started last year when we asked a single question in the community grants application about additional services you might find helpful. We followed it up with a similar sector-wide survey this spring to make sure that we heard from organizations that didn't submit an application last year. And since then, James has been analyzing responses and having one-on-one conversations with respondents who told us they had more to say. The next step is to look at the data we gather every year through the community grants process. To do that, we need to take out elements that may skew the data, namely the knowledge that there was additional funding available for education-related programs. It's an imperfect measurement for a whole host of reasons, but we can extrapolate some information about need in our different focus areas by looking at the volume and type of requests, and especially the gap between dollars requested and what's funded over time. But we know that the data from the past 10 years is compromised by that uneven allocation of funds. So we're removing that factor. For the next 3 years, we're evening out the allocations so that each focus area will get roughly the same amount of money to spend. We are not throwing out the past out entirely and are still taking into account what we do know about unmet need. So it is not an exact split. We also aren't going to change the focus areas because that would be a logistical nightmare. So each of the 8 categories will get between 8 and 18% of the $1.7 million pie. We are also suspending multi-year grant requests for the next 3 years. This is a change that we debated intensely in the office, but we came to the conclusion that without a funding priority like Education Works, it will be hard for our committees to decide which programs should be funded for multiple years. Our hope is that soon we'll be able to give a better answer to the question, what else, thanks to your input. So cheers to the next 10 years of CFNIL and working together to build a healthier, more sustainable Northern Illinois. And now I'll hand it off to James to talk about the nitty-gritty stuff.
All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. As the slide says, I'm James Patterson. That is not a lie. Senior Program Director here at the Community Foundation. And I do have the privilege to talk with you today about our Community Grants Program, which is our flagship grant program. We'll go to the next slide and I'll talk a little bit about our focus areas. Sarah had mentioned these already, but just to go through them quickly. And before I do that even, just to mention that these are very well described on our website in great detail. So go there to take a look and see more of the detail on that. But just to go through them here, we have arts and humanities, which is exactly what you would think it would be. We have basic needs and compassionate support. That's really for food and shelter and that sort of thing, but also for programs that alleviate suffering within our community. We have career pathways, which again is what it sounds like, trying to help folks get into meaningful careers and be able to support themselves and their families. Complementary education is the focus area where we do all these other kinds of educational programs that add to our community and add to people's ability to become educated. It could be in the community or it could be in the schools, after school programs. It could also be library programs. It could be literacy programs throughout the community. And then we have dignity and respect. And that's really about promoting dignity and respect in our community and also taking care of those vulnerable populations that we have in our community. And the health area is really exactly what it sounds like, except that we have done a fair amount of research funding for health-related items in that focus area. Sustainable communities is probably the most eclectic area that we do have, but I always maintain that there's a strong theme that runs through it. This is all the types of programs that undergird the environment that we have within our community to allow us to do all the other things that we do in our community. So for an example, our natural environment, our built environment, our neighborhoods, public safety, economic activity, all those things are critical in order to have a vibrant community, but they sort of are under the radar in many ways. And then youth and families, again, is much what it sounds like, but there is a strong focus on capacity building, strengthening families, prevention, and that sort of thing there. So those are the 8 areas, and they're not as distinct as maybe we would like them to be. There's a lot of permeability between these different areas. As an example, you might have an arts education program. And so, boy, is that complementary education or is that arts and humanities? It's a good question. There is some overlap. And in this particular case with an arts education program, we probably would put that in arts because there is a big, strong arts focus. But the question about which one it would go to makes a lot of sense. And there's many other examples of that throughout there. But here's what I want you to think about. Don't stress. Do not worry. In the beginning of your application, you're going to need to select one of these 8 focus areas. If you select one and we look at it and we say, gosh, we think it'll do better in another category, we just move it over there for you. No harm, no foul, not a big deal. So do not stress about that. In fact, most things we do not want you to stress about within the community grants application. We have assistance for you there too. So we'll go to the next slide and talk about our grant making philosophies. So with our grant making philosophies, and these were some philosophies that developed over multiple years and sort of were codified really in the last 3 or 4 years. but they all spring really from the idea that you nonprofits are our partners in the work that we all do. Um, we are not boots on the ground. We are not the ones doing the actual work. Our money can't do any good unless you folks are there to do that great work that you do. So we look at you as experts in your fields and try to respect you in that way. So that's the first one. And we also respect our reviewers. These are folks from the community that also have expertise and stay on our committees for a fair amount of time so that they can learn more about that particular focus area. We do believe that partial funding should be awarded with caution. And again, this springs from the respect that we have that you put together a budget, you know how much you need to run a successful program. And so to the best of our ability, we want to be able to respect that and give you the best chance for success in that case. We also believe that it's our obligation, our duty to fund our share of your indirect costs. If you're going to run a program for us, so to speak, then we should be supporting your indirect costs in that way as well. Salary is not a dirty word in a community grants application. We recognize that you need competent, trained, and adequately compensated staff. You do have to compete for these folks to work for you, as with everybody. So it's very important to be able to have good quality staff. As we all know, with the nonprofit sector, most of the organizations are providing services, just like in the for-profit community. That takes people. That's the way that works. And we also recognize that you're going to have to write grants and receive grants in order to sustain your programs. You don't have the luxury of charging your clients, full price for many of the services that you're providing. Unlike a for-profit company would be able to do that. And the last one, and the most recent one really, is our belief that transparency is so important. And we try to do this in many ways. And just by putting the grant making philosophies out there for you as being transparent. One of the other things that we do is the scoring rubric that our community advisors use to make their decisions and do the scoring on the grant applications. That is posted on our website for you to review, and I would encourage you to do that. We have nonprofit partners that actually sit on our grants committee, so they get to see how it all functions. So we really try not to hide things. We'll go to the next slide and talk about some of the resources that are available to you. The main resource, the first stop, the flagship you want to go to is our community grants page. It has our grant guidelines on there, everything about who is eligible, what we fund, what we don't fund, all of those things. It's got the descriptions of the focus areas we just talked about, and all the details that we can never cover in a presentation like this. So that's your first stop, go there. But there are other resources on our website. For example, we have a whole page dedicated to grant seekers, a lot of resources there. And then for current grantees, we have another whole page that has to do with that. But there are other resources on the next slide that we also can provide. So within the application itself, there are many tutorials about various aspects of the application. Anything from how to use the collaborator feature or how to use the copy answers feature. Those are embedded right into the application. It can be very helpful to you. There's also a whole page on our website for frequently asked questions. And these are common questions that come up all the time. It's a great place to start if you have a question. There is now a draft application that will be really helpful to you more or less after this grant application closes at this point. But we're going to leave that open all year. That way you can go into that application. Well, let me step back one second and say, if you've applied with us before, you know that we have an application that's built on branching questions, depending on the size of your request, but also perhaps the support type or some other factors, the focus area in some cases, and it will populate different questions based on that. It tailors the application to your situation. Okay, so the nice thing about the draft application is that it will do the same thing for you. So you'll know exactly what types of questions are going to come up for you. So it can be an incredibly helpful tool for that purpose. We do have a preview version of the application that's within the portal, but now that we have the draft application, I'm not sure that there's really a reason to use that. If you find a reason, let me know. Um, there's also a PDF version of the application that we have posted year round. Again, trying to be transparent and make sure that you're aware of what is going to be expected of you in a grant application. The nice thing about the PDF though is that you can print that out and sit down with a team and brainstorm on different aspects or questions of the application. The next two pieces here I think are really important. We have a sample budget and budget narrative posted on the website that gives you a very clear view into what we're looking for on the budget page of the application and the budget narrative. And looking at the specificity we're looking for and all of that. I would encourage you to take a look at it before you do your budget, and then after you do your budget, take a look at it again and see if it looks pretty similar and see if you're on the right track. Very similar to the next piece here, the evaluation plans and result statement examples that we have on the website. That's another fairly technical part of the application. And those examples are they're really good. They will give you a very good idea into what we're looking for in that area. The community grants report is also posted on our website. And again, that's partly in order to be transparent, so you can see every single grant that we made last year in 2024 with the community grants program, the amount that we gave to the various organizations, what focus area it was in. It also helps you kind of figure out what fits best in different focus areas. So that's a helpful document as well. And again, the proposal review guidelines. This is that scoring rubric. I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. You can see exactly what the committees are looking at when they're looking at a grant application. And of course, you can always refer back to this PowerPoint. So new stuff for 2025. That's probably why most of you are here. And before I start going through each of these are mostly in response to the incredibly competitive cycle we had last year. And really the year before was also quite competitive. Last year we had a record number of applications, 152 for the community grants program. And we love to get all these applications. We love to see all the different programs that are happening, but we also have, as I said before, community reviewers who volunteer their time. So we have to sort of strike a balance in terms of the number of applications, and at the same time, still try to be as equitable as possible across all our applicants. So one of the things we've done is added a 2 application per organization limit this year. In the past years, it's been 3 applications. We think 2 still gives you a good chance to receive funding, but also may reduce the amount of applications that our reviewers have to review. Well, proposals clarification deadline. Let me explain that a little bit. Lisa goes through every one of these applications as they come in real time, honestly. And if she sees something that's missing, she oftentimes will reach out to the applicant and say, hey, did you realize that you're missing this piece of information? You need to get that in if you want the application to be considered, that sort of thing. Now, she is allowed to do that up until 1 week prior to the application. We are not allowing her to do that in the last week of the application. She would do that, but we are not letting her. So that last week, as you can imagine, gets pretty hectic. But it's a good reason to get started early on your application and submit early, if at all possible. We have taken the school pre-authorization form that's required if you're working with a school district. We've taken that and built that directly into the application. Much more streamlined than what you would have done in the past, where you have to download the document, complete it, take it to school district, have them complete it and sign off on it, and then you would need to, perhaps scan it, PDF it, and then upload it. In this case, it's very streamlined in that you just put the information into the form. It's going to send an email to that school district, and they're going to complete their portion and then send it back to us, and it's done. So we think that'll be really helpful for you. And then jumping to the dignity and respect name change. I mentioned that focus area earlier. It used to be called, as you may remember, equity, dignity, and respect. The name has changed, but nothing else has changed. We are funding everything we would normally fund in that area that we've always funded. The only reason we've changed the name is so that it doesn't red flag any grants that you might receive through that focus area. So there's no changes to the content of what we're funding there. As Sarah had mentioned, multi-year funding has been suspended over the course of the next 3 years. But let me assure you that you can apply for the same program multiple years in a row. You just have to apply, and it's not set up as a multi-year. And if you remember, with our tiered application, if you submit a request that's under 10,000, you get a much more streamlined application that does not require you to submit organizational financials. There's an exception to this, though, this year, and that's if you're an organization that has not applied to us in the last 5 years. The reviewers would like to see your organizational financials in that case. So expect to have to provide that if you have not applied in the last 5 years. And another piece is trying to ensure that organizations are sort of sticking to their mission, that we're funding programs that stick to their mission where they really are experts and do a great job. And we'll go to the next slide. I'm going to get a quick drink. All right, eligibility. First thing I want to say about eligibility is you do need to be an organization and not an individual. What types of organizations qualify? Well, 501c3, nonprofits, religious organizations, units of government, and public universities and colleges. You need to be active to the community and the public for at least 1 year as of December 1st. You do need to be serving our counties, Boone, Ogles, Stevenson, and Winnebago counties. And we don't fund for religious purposes, although we fund faith-based organizations all the time. They have some great programs and projects that they do. And we don't do fundraisers, mostly because we could empty the entire pool just on fundraisers. There's so many out there. It's certainly worthwhile. And how would we pick? How would we ever pick? So we'll go to the next slide and talk about reporting,
James?
which is, yes.
Sorry, James, before you move on, we did have a question.
Perfect.
Going back to your comment about financials.
Yeah.
And the question is that the exception if they're new to the community grants, like it's their first time to community grants, or to the community foundation in general? Like if they've received it, yeah, go ahead.
That's a great question. And it's for community grants, specifically for community grants, because there's separate reviewers that review those applications. What a great question, though.
Yeah, and then a follow-up similar question for partnerships. Similar question for partnerships. New to community grant.
No,
yeah, go ahead.
It's because James accidentally skipped one of the things on the last page.
I did. All right, let me address that. Thank you so much for that. You got to keep an eye on me, folks. But yeah, no, one of the things that we've noticed lately is we have a lot of organizations that want to come in from the outside of our community and serve people in our community. And while we applaud that they want to serve our community, we really want to focus our grant making on organizations that have been working in our area for some time, and also those that are somehow embedded in our community. So if an organization is going to serve our community for the first time, we really need to see formal partnerships developed. So maybe if they're working, maybe it's a literacy program of some sort, they should be working with, say, the Boys and Girls Club, or they should be working with, our community centers or things like that, and have those fully developed prior to applying to the Community Foundation. Thank you for pointing that out. So another piece of eligibility is being current on your reporting. For all community grants, and I always tell people if a project is complete, then your best bet is to go ahead and complete that final report through our portal as you would normally. However, if your project is not complete, if you're still in the middle of it, and that's very common, then we're going to ask you to commit or submit an interim report that you actually will upload right to our application. and the instructions are right there on the application for you. And if you don't know if you're up to date, just get in touch with Lisa, and Lisa can help you with that. Taking a look at the timeline, well, the application's open already, folks. So you could certainly be in there. I know many of you have already started applications, and that's great. And we also encourage you, if you haven't done it yet, to register on our portal as soon as possible. That way, in case there's any glitches, we can get those worked out and you're not doing that at the last minute. We have a submission deadline this year of August 14th at 5 p.m. So be aware of that. We will make the awards before December 1st, we say. So usually it's before Thanksgiving, but December 1st to be safe. And bear in mind that we don't do retroactive funding, so your project should start after you would receive those dollars. And the funding period is about 14 months. It's really until February of not the next year, but the year after that, that you had to complete the program. And there is some flexibility there too. If for some reason your program year doesn't fit that exactly, you just need to reach out to us and we can have a conversation. Most times we can do an extension for you. But as I mentioned, it's a very, very competitive process. Always has been, but it's becoming more competitive. 152 applications last year, about 2 million in requests. We were able to fund 85 of those. You can see right there, there's a lot that does not get funded, unfortunately. And we were able to fund 1.7 million last year. So how do we do this, you ask? How do we make these decisions? Well, we have a 3-layered review process. And it starts with staff review that I mentioned before, with Lisa going through all those. And then Sarah and I help in various ways on the back end too. And those that make it through the staff screening, they go to our committees and our committees review them. Now our committees, they spend 3 weeks reviewing these applications and scoring them on their own individually. And then they come together for a meeting, and it's 10 to 12 people come together with their own perspectives and finally make those really difficult choices. And they are difficult choices. There's a lot of hand wringing that goes on. There's a lot of times we want to fund particular programs and we're just not able to because of the budget. But that is the process, and it served us well. And then once the committees make their recommendations, that goes to the board for the board to approve. But we are committed to having a fair and objective review process. As I mentioned before, these reviewers are people from your community. They might be your neighbors for all you know, but they're people that have some experience and interest in the various focus areas that we have. And they do serve on our committees for multiple years so that they become even more familiar. But we also have a very robust conflict of interest policy. Those reviewers, if they are involved in an organization, they need to declare that. And then not only that, they're not allowed to review the application. And when we have a conversation in that meeting about that application, they leave the room. They actually have to go to our stairwell, which is, we probably should provide some better accommodations for them. But in any case, they do have to leave the room. And so there can be free discussion without that influence. We do not post or publish the names of our committee members to avoid any sort of lobbying or anything like that. And we really make it a point to give the same advice we would give to any organization to any other organization. It's a commitment we have to being as fair as we possibly can be. But don't let that stop you from calling with questions. We do want to hear your questions. We do want to help you submit a quality application. So what are some tips here with our application? So first of all, they have to be submitted online. That's not news anymore. And I like to talk about the lower tier application. That's those that are under $10,000 because it's a greatly streamlined application, again, without the financials and then many fewer questions. In that particular case, it's going to be a lot easier for you to complete the application. So if you have a program that $10,000 is enough to fund or less, then that's definitely make that choice. That's going to be to your benefit to do that. And people oftentimes will ask me, hey, what if I have a currently funded program and I want to apply for the exact same program again right now? Will you give us another grant or allow us to apply for that program? And I say, yes, absolutely. Please do that, apply. But what I want you to do, or what you should consider perhaps, is when you complete your interim report, and if you look at the instructions for the interim report, you'll see that it's a very streamlined report. It asks 3 basic questions. It's just to give us a short update. However, if you're applying for the same program, then I would encourage you to take a little more time with that interim report and get into some of the metrics that you've been tracking and give us an idea of the impact that you're making up to that point. There's been many times where the actual report that comes in does a better job of selling the program than the application. And that's simply because an application is a projection of what you plan to do and the impact that you might make, whereas reporting are actual results. So keep that in mind. And just a mention of the attachments. Be prepared that there's a limit to the size of the attachments that you upload. So it's usually 5 megabytes, but it does indicate on each question what that limit is. So pay attention to that so that doesn't become frustrating. Most of these are PDFs, except for the pictures we request through Dropbox. We'll go to the next slide. I mentioned the 2 application limit, and that means 2 unique applications. So you wouldn't want to prepare the same application for the same program and then send that to 2 different focus areas, hoping for a second bite at the apple, so to speak. It does have to be a unique, two unique applications per organization. And for this purpose, with the 2 application limit, an organization and its foundation, even if it's a separate EIN and entity, they count as one organization. And that's just to try to be as fair as possible. And just to mention that there is, as I sort of have mentioned, there's a upload field for that interim report. So that is streamlined right into the application process. We'll talk a little bit about the support types that you can choose. And these are important because they do impact what questions you'll be answering. It dials in more relevant questions in this case. So an event is going to be something that happens within less than a week. A project is going to be something that has a definite start and end date, doesn't typically recur. A program could be similar to a project, but typically does recur either annually or periodically throughout the year. And then our latest support type is the capital commodity support type. And we'll go to the next slide and look at that in a little bit more detail because it's a little different. It's something I made up. So I figure you need a little more explanation. So with capital, we're not talking about capital campaigns. We don't fund capital campaigns for pretty much similar reasons that we don't do fundraisers. We would easily spend all of our money doing that and only being able to help in a smaller way. So we're more of a project program-based funder. However, we do fund small capital projects. We have done a ton of ADA compliant bathroom remodels, very important things to do if you're going to be serving people in a building. We've purchased a number of vans. We've furnished buildings or rooms and buildings and things like that. So smaller things, equipment to support a program we can do. So that's the capital piece. And then the commodity is really whenever you're purchasing items that you're then just going to distribute. There's really no program that's based around it. It's just simply distributing those things. So food is a great example of that. Another great example might be every year we have the backpack programs where kids receive a backpack full of wonderful school supplies and so on to help them get a good start at school. There's not really a program around it. The kids just come, the families come and they get their backpack. Maybe they have some games and things during the event or whatever. But there's not a program developed around it. And one of the reasons we created this particular support type is because it really it does not lend itself to our traditional evaluation plan for a project, program, and an event. So we created a different evaluation plan that corresponds to this type. I encourage people, if you have a project that fits this category, definitely select it because it will be an easier application for you. So looking at the budget, and with the budget, you want to include only revenue and expenses for this specific proposal, not for your overall organization, and not for just like a subset of your organization, but literally the things that you're requesting within this particular proposal. And we really encourage you to claim your indirect costs. There's an actual dedicated field in the budget for the indirect costs. We want you to take your 15% of your request amount. And you don't have to tell us what you're using it for. It's just to support your organization, because your organization is supporting the program that we're asking you to run on our behalf with our dollars, right? So again, we feel that's our obligation to do that. Be sure in your budget that your revenue equals or exceeds the expenses. And we want to really see that you have a plan to fund the program. And you might wonder, well, how would it ever exceed the expenses? Well, it would if you don't know that you have all the funding that you've applied for. So you may have to have an extra grant in there that you're applying for. You don't know if you're going to receive it or not. And I mentioned, again, the sample budget and budget narrative. I mention it again because I really do think that's a great way for you to see whether you're on the right track with your budget. And the same thing with the evaluation plans. Even though it's not technically part of the budget, it's another good time to plug it. I really think it's a good idea to look at those sample documents. And of course, there are a need for quotes that are over $5,000 with a few exceptions, but there are very clear instructions within the budget area. Read that and it will help you, I believe, know when you need to have those quotes. But generally speaking, anything that's over 5,000. And if you would like more information about the budget, we're going to do workshops that a whole hour is dedicated to the budget. And wonderful segue, right? Here we have the workshops that we're doing. Lisa's going to work on the budget side of it. I'm going to work on the evaluation plan side of it. But you can see we're having those workshops on the left-hand side on July 22nd, July 24th, and July 29th. You can sign up through our website. And then on the right side, something we've started more recently is what we call applicant work sessions. It's kind of like office hours. There is no planned program or curriculum that we're going to be sharing. What it is Lisa and I in our attic with you, and you sign up for like an hour slot, and you can work on your application. You can pick our brain, ask us questions. It's just sort of an informal way to be able to ask more questions and do that in person. And again, you can sign up for all of these on our website. And if you have not applied before, I definitely encourage you to do these. Even if you have applied before, sometimes they're really great reminders of what we need to do in those applications. So the grantee orientation is something we do with all of the grantees that receive a grant. And we do that the week of January 12th in this case, and we'll have multiple sessions to try to accommodate your schedule. You'll sign up for those, and we'll announce those later down the road here. If you have not attended a grantee orientation in the last couple of years, then we require you to do that. If you have, you're still welcome to come. It can still be a really good refresher and reminder of that time, of what's required for those things. And what we'll do during that grantee orientation is really focus on, what's required in your reporting to get you off to a good start on collecting that data. And then also any publicity requirements and that sort of thing. And then, of course, just answering the questions you have about our partnership as funder and grantee. So we'll go to the next slide, and I believe it's time for Lisa to take over.
Hello, I am Lisa DeLang, and I want everybody out there to know that this is my favorite time of year. I screen all the applications as they come in. If you are already writing one, I can guarantee you I've looked at it at least a little bit, because I'm actively in there looking for ways to help you. And we can go to the next slide. This is where you're going to start. This is our CFNIL landing page, and everybody else had these nice graphics and nice looking slides, and you're going to get a lot of screenshots and arrows and circles from these. So I just want you to know that you could find a ton of information on our site. We have resources all over the place under grants and scholarships opportunities, under receive resources. And we always want you to know what's going on with us, so always check out our news. But to get started, you're going to hit that Apply for Grant black button in the upper right-hand corner. That is going to take you to our portal landing page. And if you already have an account, you know it's the case sensitive. It's going to be your email as your username. And then you use your password. If you need to reset your password, use that forgot your password. If you have trouble with that, contact me. I can start that for you. If you don't have an account, you go ahead and start that create new account button. And the sooner the better. Try not to wait until the last week, because if you run into glitches and have a hard time, it's just going to be crunch time and stressful. If you're not sure if you have an account, call me. Don't start a new account if you think that maybe your organization has an account. It gets messy on our side over here, and just give me a call. I'll let you know if you could do that. This is just to remind me to let you know everything. When you start a new account, make sure to get all of your organization information correct. Once that account is made, you cannot edit it yourself. You have to contact us to change it. So try to get that right. The primary user of the account should be the person who starts it, and then we can add people on as we go. This is the dashboard that you're going to see, and it's a new dashboard. I think it's a little bit more user-friendly than the old one, but you might want to take a little bit of time to get used to it. We do have an online tutorial that you can go through if you'd like more information, but you can apply through here, see your organizational history. If you are a reviewer as well as an applicant, up in the upper right-hand corner, make sure you have your role correctly on there. Yes, because you won't be able to see any of the stuff that I'm talking about if you still are in reviewer mode. The portal has also added the capability to be associated with more than one organization. So you can toggle between different organizations if you're a grant writer or you're a financial person for more than one place. You can see your history, you can see anything that's assigned to you as far as follow-ups, anything that you started. This is where you're going to start on the portal page, but you're going to click that apply button to get to the apply page. I got all that. I just have to make sure I reminded myself there. Yes, the preview doesn't save. I always just tell people, don't even go to the preview. You can, but just go ahead and get started in the application. That way you're not worrying about things saving and not saving. There are a ton of online videos and written tutorials that you can keep an eye on. This application does auto save. There is a save button. It's a lie. It's just there to make everybody feel better. We found that when we took it away, that everybody was so nervous about their application not saving that we would get a lot of calls. So there's a save button. It does alert you to incomplete fields, but the application is auto saving, so don't worry about that. There are a couple important features that you're going to want to be aware of. There's the copy previous answers, and I know James talked about that a little bit, but this is a great tool if you've applied with us before, especially if you are applying for a grant that was similar or the same to something you applied to before. It's going to save you a ton of time. It'll pop up with all of the applications that you've submitted to us before, and you can choose which ones you'd like to bring answers over for, and then you can go in and edit those answers if you want to update anything for this year. The collaborate feature is also great. Oftentimes there's more than one person working on an application. You might have a programs person filling out some of the information. You might have a financial person filling out some of the information, and you'll be able to go in there, invite people to collaborate on your application, and then set their permissions. You could just have it so they could view, edit, or submit on your behalf. And although it is a great tool, we do want you to know that you should not, or you should at least try not to work on it at the same time if you have two people in there collaborating at the same time, somebody's information is going to be overriding another person's. So try to schedule that if you can with whoever you're going to be working with. And then we do have a questions list. You can go and see all the questions that you might run into on the application. You can do that again. I always just suggest you get started. Just jump in there and get started and get ready. We do have a Dropbox for any media that you would like to submit. And I always want to encourage people to use our metric that we put in here, your organization name and project title and photo number. Every year we have somebody submit photos and they all go into one Dropbox. Sometimes I cannot figure out what those photos go to, and there's no way for me to find out. So they go unseen. And a photo is a great way to emphasize your program or your project. We had Carpenter's Place apply several years ago for new carpet, and they wrote a great application, but sometimes words don't fully project what the project is. They were like, oh, okay, they need new carpet. But when we finally looked at the carpet pictures, they needed new carpet. They did end up getting that grant, but they might not have without those pictures. So sometimes the picture can say things that you can't in words. Also, we want you to know that we use these pictures for our grants catalog. We put them online, we put them out there, and we never want to put information out there that is sensitive. So if you would like your pictures to be seen by the committees, but not be used for other purposes, put do not use on the file name, and we will not use those pictures. All right, I think we got all that. And I am going to hand this over to Jennifer.
Another opportunity that we want to be sure that you're aware about is our NUS We Trust program. So both, we're looking for new members for the NUS We Trust Council, which is a group of high school age students from across the region who run a grant program that's very similar to community grants. And so that program runs during the school year. They're going to hold an info bash on August 2nd for students who might be interested in learning more and seeing what being an NUS We Trust council member is all about. And the application to apply to be a council member for the 25-26 school year will open on August 1st on our website. We also want to let you know, because NUS We Trust Council manages this grant process for the past few years, starting in during the pandemic. The grant process split into two parts: one for youth-written, youth-serving projects, and one for adult or nonprofit-written youth-serving projects. The youth portion of that will continue to be managed by the NUS We Trust Council. They'll manage that whole cycle, but the adult portion they will not be managing that anymore. Anyone who would have applied through that process should apply through community grants. Though we just, for efficiency's sake, for them, for you, for everybody, we're just going to use applications that are put through community grants that are youth serving, that would fit the qualifications of an NUS We Trust grant, will be passed on to the NUS We Trust Council for consideration for those awards. So that's a little bit of a change. If you have questions about that, please reach out. If you've received an NUS We Trust grant in the past and are like, what does that mean? Please reach out to us and we can give you more information about that. Our neighborhood grants program also changed slightly this year. It moved to having a rolling deadline rather than a distinct cycle. It just became very clear that nonprofit or neighborhood level projects, neighborhood groups and things like that, their energy and activity doesn't always fit into an annual cycle. So we wanted to make it more accessible for those types of groups. So again, that's a rolling application until funds are depleted each year. I will let you know that we have depleted the funds for 2025. So if you have a grant or know of a group that you think would be a good fit for these, be thinking about applying come January 1st for funds for 2026. The Excalibur and Excelsior Awards are an annual celebration of the people and organizations that make our communities wonderful. The best and brightest of Northern Illinois is how we've taglined that. And these awards have been going on for decades, but we have only been a partner in presenting the awards, but this will be our third year helping present these awards. And so we want to be sure to tell you the nomination form for these awards will open on August 15th and close October 1st. So be thinking about which of your board members or volunteers that you're going to tee up to nominate your organization for this award, or who in your circle you know that is a champion, a person or a couple or a group that are a champion for good work in our region, and be sure to nominate them. The awards will be presented at the event celebration on December 11th. And with that, we will open it up for any other questions. You can please feel free to type them in the chat, or you can come off mute if you would like and ask your question.
I was just going to say, we do have a question in the chat about salary, and I can address that really quickly.
Yes.
So as far as salary goes, again, we expect that we'll be paying some salary if you have a program that involves people working with other people. In this particular case, you're asking specifically about an organization who would write specifically for a salary for an executive director or a new position. The only thing with that is that in that particular case, the committee may think a little bit more about how will you sustain that in the future. So to the extent that you have some answer to that question and you put that into your application, that's to your advantage. Having said that, it will not be thrown out because you're asking for the salary for a particular new position. But I do, as advice, I would tell you the first part of what I just said.
And following up on that, we also fund only programs, projects, and events. We don't fund operating costs. Believe me, we would love to. We just haven't figured out how to do that at this point. So you would need the director to, it would have to be associated with some sort of project or program or some sort of specific outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And but I would also say though, our indirect rate is how we fund operating costs.
Exactly.
So that's our answer to that, unfortunately.
Yep.
Cool. Well, everyone have a wonderful day, a fantastic weekend, and we look forward to reading your applications.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.